If you told me in October before I walked into the cinema to see Aftersun that it would be as widely acclaimed and popular as it is now, I would have been skeptical. There are always a few films released every year I love that tend to fly under the radar, seldom garnering the attention they deserve. I thought this film would fall within that category, but I've never been happier to be wrong. Winning numerous awards across different festivals and ceremonies, Paul Mescal's recent Oscar nomination put the icing on the cake. I consider this to be the best film of the decade so far, as both its technical excellence and moving themes are worthy of deeper exploration. Aftersun is an inherently personal work of art, one that is emotionally malleable and resonant at its core. The film's ambiguous nature stems from a place of truth, allowing the viewer to form their own interpretation by filling the gaps with intuition. I'll be discussing major plot points in Aftersun as well as briefly touching upon the films on your screen now, so as always, please proceed with caution. Father and daughter relationships have been portrayed in riveting ways over the years, but I find stories woven through authenticity to be the most powerful. One of my favorite films to display this dynamic is Peter Bogdanovich's Paper Moon, starring Ryan and Tatum O'Neal. It features the palpable chemistry between a real-life relationship, translating this masterfully onto the screen. The pre-existing connection that the two share is evident, as Bogdanovich utilizes their strengths to craft a tale defined by the power of connection. Although Scottish director Charlotte Wells takes a similar approach to this, the similarity lies not within the casting, but the story itself. In an interview with W Magazine, she elaborates on the film being emotionally autobiographical. I allowed, in the early stages of the film, my own memories and anecdotes from holidays and throughout childhood to inform the skeleton outline of the script. The process of digging through my past eventually infiltrated the film itself, and it took on this retroactive gaze. I suppose that this is in the sense in which it is emotionally autobiographical. It ultimately builds to a feeling that is mine. Beyond that early outline, I was very clear that the film was always fiction. I was never on this holiday. It wasn't my experience. These characters, while their starting point was certainly inspired by me and my dad, were ultimately infused by many different people, fictional and otherwise. As you move toward production, the story diverges from this place of self in a way that allows you to put yourself on the page in a way that feels very exposing, but less exposing once you get to the final film, because it has transformed into its own thing. Actors Paul Mescal and Frankie Corio are obviously not related in real life like the O'Neals, so their realism must be forged through an alternative way, something that Wells only starts. The small batch of memories she builds off of coincides with the brilliant acting on display by the pair. Small moments like the Polaroid scene are most certainly derived from the aforementioned, as showcased within a photo of Wells and her father. Moments like these are seemingly low-key and work to establish a feeling, and while they certainly succeed at doing that, they are far more monumental than they appear. Calum is a young father who's split up with Sophie's mother. He hides a few small things from Sophie, like his smoking or purchasing an expensive rug. She is aware of his financial and occupational hardship, but he does his best to have a fun time on the holiday. As time goes on, he begins to exhibit signs of depression, consistently reinforced by his engagement in acts of self-care. It becomes increasingly alarming to see the guarded pain behind his eyes. He never thought that he would ever make it to 30. The first instance in which Calum's feelings are precariously hinted at occurs after Sophie loses her mask in the sea. Although he expresses his initial discontent at first, she comforts him. Her keen personality is not enough for her to realize that her father's depression masks itself, with the accident only functioning as a trigger that he quickly represses. We soon learn that this sense of reluctance is commonplace, for every instance of supposed contentment pushes him deeper into oblivion, a destination that somehow edges closer by the day, weighing down his spirit. The karaoke scene is a heartbreaking example of how Calum's mental health struggles manifest themselves in unexpected ways. Sophie is still too young to fully comprehend his reluctance to sing with her, and he can't quite tell her why. Their interactions together on vacation are the basis for Sophie's desire to get closer to her father from an emotional perspective, while their time spent apart contributes to the impenetrable barrier surrounded by a veil of mysticism. Mescal's mannerisms are detailed and devastating, entrancing the audience with a haunting display of struggle against a feeling unbeknownst to those around him. Despite the holiday's ups and downs, there's an unspoken reverence between the two that maintains its strength throughout their time together. Genuine affection, love, and joy are abundant. Calum is a good father, as demonstrated in his constant striving to show Sophie how much he cares for her. This sentiment is reciprocated. The mud bath sequence perhaps is the best example of this reverence on display, as the words they say to each other do not necessarily provide the closure and comfort desperately needed. Simply being with one another is enough to remedy the past. The mud symbolizes the temporary bandage placed on Calum's overarching problem, destined to wash away again. Sophie attempts to cover his entire back, but it is never enough. Moments of happiness come and go, but the condition remains, further taking its toll. In a beautiful homage to an iconic shot from Claire Denis's Beau Travail, Wells forges the shot of her own as equally powerful. Something is still troubling Calum as he watches the kind birthday wish commence. His fleeting stoic expression fades into a series of uncontrollable sobs. Once again, no clear inclination is given as to the cause of this outburst. His pain is communicated through moments of solitude within the seconds between every word. We expect this to be the crescendo, the time for the grand catharsis to reveal itself, but it never does. On a first watch, the viewer is rendered to witness the events that occur from a merely observational viewpoint, picking up pieces of the journey alongside Sophie. On the second watch, we can begin to place them together to truly understand what happens to Calum by putting ourselves in his shoes. It is this repeated recollection that grants us the capacity to empathize, the ability to forgive, and the propensity to love. Although it is never explicitly alluded to, I believe it is heavily implied that Calum has attempted suicide in the past, with the letters addressed to Sophie shown briefly on screen, likely never making their way to her. The words were left unsaid, the outstretched hand was left unheld. Inherently humanistic at its core, the film portrays Sophie as forgiving, with her final look confirming this. She is searching to understand him and why he left her. In another world, they won't have to have a last dance. While the majority of the film takes place at the Turkish resort, I believe that equal importance must be placed on the scenes that do not occur at the location. Number 1, the video footage. Number 2, adult Sophie's fleeting moments of reminiscence. Number 3, the rave sequence. The physical camera itself and camera work both play an integral role in crafting the story. The beginning of the film acts as a vignette. Flashes of light, glimpses of life, and strokes of color immediately bring us closer to the characters. The footage contained within the MiniDV remains the only evidence that Sophie has left of her father, with the viewer experiencing this alongside her multiple times throughout. Since memory is malleable, the only concrete truth is contained within these precious recordings. The mood of each shot is ethereal, transporting us through time and reverberating across Sophie's interactions and impressions. Since the video footage is controlled and constructed from her point of view, this corresponds with Calum's frequent rewatching of the tapes. It's as if he's searching for something at first, but he is seeing his daughter's perception directly through her point of view. They each live life at the same pace, but do not experience it simultaneously. Their bond is unbreakable, the collective pain is shared and lived, fostering the connection forged by both pain and happiness. Sophie's implied depression is hereditary, as she explains its feeling before even knowing the word to her father. Calum is reliving this moment, reminding him of the time he first felt the same way. Calum's talks with Sophie transport him to the past, allowing him to leave clues behind via video while being recorded. The camera is a gateway to a dimension governed solely by time, as demonstrated through one of my favorite shots in the film. It's a moment we've already undergone. The recording is shown in the first scene. However, our perspective has changed. To decipher this, we must list the various places where we see the conversation unfold. Number 1, the DV camera itself, Sophie's perspective. Number 2, the television in which the camera footage is playing on, and its own reflection in both the mirror and screen. 3, in real life. 4, our perspective guided by Wells's direction. No matter which perspective we view this moment from, the interaction between Calum and Sophie remains the same, only the medium is altered. Upon further observation, I felt that Thai filmmaker Apichatpong Veerasethakul's 2006 film, Syndromes and a Century, bears a striking resemblance to that of Aftersun. Serving as a tribute to Joe's parents, the camera acts through the contemplative yet curious eyes of a child. Both films create incredibly intricate, ambient dreamscapes where characters meander through, unraveling their personalities by interacting with others. While Sophie is directly involved in dictating what displays on the screen, while her memories fill in the gaps between the video footage, Joe's camera serves as a portal to his childhood, a feeling that arises subconsciously, reforming and reliving the respective experiences in the process. Instead, he combines what Wells executes separately through Sophie's actions into a specific, streamlined approach dictated by a feeling rooted in reality and nothing else. Sophie chooses to enter the gateway of her choice, utilizing the concrete connection created by the camera, thereby bypassing the restriction of objectivity when recalling the past, unlocking the subjective underlying clues in the process. This grants her the key to employ her memories, ultimately merging the aforementioned to decipher what has happened to her father. There is a passage from director Andrei Tarkovsky's book, Sculpting in Time, that I found to be tied to the foundation of Aftersun. Generally, people's memories are precious to them. It is no accident that they are colored by poetry. The most beautiful memories are those of childhood. Of course, memory has to be worked upon before it can become the basis of an artistic reconstruction of the past, and here it is important not to lose the particular emotional atmosphere without which a memory evoked in every detail merely gives rise to a bitter feeling of disappointment. There's an enormous difference, after all, between the way you remember the house in which you were born and which you haven't seen for years, and the actual sight of the house after a prolonged absence. Usually, the poetry of the memory is destroyed by the confrontation with its origin. This eerily rings true to Sophie's childhood perception of her father versus her adult perception of her father. Innocence is the defining factor of childhood, and it creates the dichotomy between transitioning from the early stages of life to adulthood. Sophie hasn't fully understood herself as a person, so how can she be expected to see her father struggling? The vacation passes by all too quickly, as expressed by her desire to stay there longer. The ever-changing state of memory is of the utmost importance to the film's plot and structure. Although it seemingly follows a linear narrative structure, her constructions of the days are purposefully interconnected. Small building blocks of time are set in stone by the video footage, and her memories forge and mesh around them. Beauty is replaced by pain, and fantasy is replaced by reality. All sense of objectivity fades away, with the erosion of time taking its toll. The concept of memory is strictly personal, and I imagine Sophie and Calum would have incredibly different recollections of what truly revealed itself throughout the course of the holiday. Sophie sees every birthday as an exciting adventure, while Calum breaks down on his. Adulthood, in a way, presents itself to be the link between the video and her memory, finally allowing a semblance of peace to be found. Her perspective has evolved alongside her memories, but some questions remain unanswered. As Tarkovsky states, once we revisit our memories in actuality, they are never the same again. Memory is the medium, unbounded by the constraints of time. Crafting an authentic, dreamlike sequence relies on simplicity rather than complexion. The simple and slightly distorted nature of David Lynch's work, specifically in Twin Peaks, is so effective due to its familiar feel and unnerving landscape. Our sense of normalcy is disrupted by the constant flashes of darkness. Wells' attention to the characters in her scene contains a similar sense of authenticity. Cryptic within each frame, the rave sequence features perhaps the most ambiguous part of interpreting Aftersun. An intangible connection reverberates across space and time, drifting in and out of memories, future and past coexisting as one. There isn't anything extravagant or extraordinary within the creation of the rave setting in itself. Sophie, Calum, and the rest of the patrons are the only subjects in the room. A singular strobing light is used to create an alarming visual effect, playing with our eyes. One blink and she can miss it all. Why is this scene so impactful? Credit must be given to Oliver Coates' devastating mix of David Bowie and Queen's Under Pressure. The music perfectly aligns with the quick transitions as we are thrust asunder from past to present. She reaches for her father, she fails. She succeeds, they embrace, he falls. No words are exchanged. My personal interpretation is that the rave is a recurring dream that Sophie has, in which the version of Calum in the rave is a composite of the side of her father that she never knew, the true version of himself. He never shared his struggles with Sophie on that holiday, parallel to how the dream unfolds. As soon as he gets close, he breaks away, but he doesn't want to. The darkness pulls him in, stopping him from saying what needs to be said. The final shot of the film contains what may well be one of the best transitions in cinema history. 11-year-old Sophie says goodbye to adult Sophie, reassembling the meaning of her memories as the camera pans. Calum watches on, from another time, from another place, looking at older Sophie through the MiniDV screen, and when he walks back into the rave, I'd like to believe he's reaching out to Sophie again, somehow across a separate existence, freed by the might of human connection. As long as Sophie keeps searching, her father will be there. If she loses sight of him, he will again walk through the doors, re-entering her dream through the footage. I don't want their embrace to ever be broken again, and I believe they'll share another dance of joy, one that is free of pain. Calum is watching from a better place, and he always will be. Aftersun is among the first true masterpieces of this century, serving as both an ode to the power of familial connection and an elegy for the words left unsaid. It's truly a masterful cinematic work, deserving of all of the praise it's receiving, and its emotional depth is staggering. I love to hear your thoughts and interpretations of this beautiful piece of art. If you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you to all those who have already, and an extra thank you goes out to my patrons. I'll see you in the next one.